Workers use tools to carefully implant pearl nuclei into oysters, an important step in cultivating artificial pearls. A slight positional deviation may cause the cultivated pearls to be not round enough, and even directly lead to the death of the oyster. This is no less than a minimally invasive surgery for workers. After successful implantation, calcium carbonate, a secretion produced in the mother's body, coats the surface of the inner core. After several years of cultivation, pearls will become more and more round and plump. But it is a pity that it is difficult to guarantee the survival rate of female oysters during the breeding process. This also led to the fact that except for some special varieties of pearls, the larger the pearls, the higher the value. In this regard, in order to improve the survival rate of the mother oysters, these oysters have been living in artificially built breeding ponds since they were young. After about 2 years, the oysters at this time have grown up. At this time, experienced workers will use special tools to implant pearl nuclei into the scallop neat. It is worth mentioning that the workers will fill the pearl and its surroundings with mantle tissue cut from another oyster to prevent the pearl nucleus from falling off. Then, fix the oysters that have completed the operation on the net, and throw them into the sea in groups of 4 or 5. They feed on mayflies released by workers, but surfaces can easily become infested with barnacle-like parasites. In order not to affect the feeding of mothers, workers need to clean up the parasites every 3 days. In this way, after 2 years of cultivation, the size of the pearls in the oysters has grown to the standard for harvesting. After taking out the pearl, the space in the body has been enlarged at this time. The reimplantation of pearls in the second child will be significantly larger in size than the previous batch of pearls. And this kind of pearl will be made individually, and the remaining ones of uniform size will also be made into necklaces and jewelry, and then they can be sold. A simple sewing needle takes more than 2 days to make. Its entire manufacturing process begins with these coils of fine steel wire. The machine first pulls 2 rolls of steel wire apart at the same time, and then pulls them into a narrow channel through guide rails to straighten the wire. Then, a blade cuts them to the length of 2 seams. After cutting, they will be shot neatly into the iron basin container below. Each wire here will eventually be used to make 2 sewing needles. The grinding wheel will rotate on it with these steel wires. The other grinding wheel above will rotate in the opposite direction to touch the end of the steel wires. After 6 passes through this grinding process, the steel needles have a very sharp point. They then pass through a series of printers, the first of which flattens the needles in the middle, making them 2 cylinders. The next printer will punch 2 needle holes in the flattened position. Finally, a third machine splits them in 2 and removes any excess material present on the needles. When completed, they drop into a collection bucket below, turning the original 1 wire into the current 2. It only takes 3 simple steps to sew a stitch. Next, these sewing needles will all go through a process called quenching, which changes the internal structure of the metal through extreme temperature changes so as to achieve the purpose of strengthening the metal. Workers then coat the needles with glycerin and polishing powder, wrap them in plastic and cotton and sew them together. Then, it will cover the package with a layer of leather, and then put the whole package into a special roller pressing machine. The package will continue to roll in the machine for 2 days, and foamation will follow the inside of the package. Polishing powders are constantly rubbing against each other, and when you're done they look smoother. They are then washed in a washing machine filled with soapy water, which removes any polishing powder left on the needles and prepares them for the next step of electroplating. The electroplating process will give it a corrosion-resistant nickel layer. Next, foamation will be sent into a sorting machine to ensure that the ends of the needles are all pointing in the same direction. Afterwards, a reviewer will inspect foamation and remove defective finished products through naked eye screening. One end of the needle eye will be put into the gold solution. Just turn on the current, and the solution will adhere to the nickel element, so that the position of the needle eye is more conspicuous. From then on, they can usher in the final packaging work. You only need to wait for the fully automatic packaging line to complete the packaging before it can be sold. There are things in the body of this conch that are dozens of times more expensive than gold, and 1 gram can be sold for $3,000. This is a murex that extracts a precious dye called tyriant purple. You must be wondering, there are so many purples in nature, why this kind is so precious. Although there are many purple plants, it is extremely difficult to extract purple as a dye. Tyriant purple is extracted from the glands of a species of murex found in the Mediterranean. This kind of pigment has good dyeing performance, and the dyed purple color is not easy to fade. However, the refining process is very cumbersome, and it often takes a huge amount of murex to extract a few grams of pigment. Therefore, purple was once the special color of the ancient Roman Empire. After the workers collected the murex, they first cleaned and sorted them. Then pick up a hammer to break its shell, exposing the glands inside, and the precious purple is in it. During the process, pay attention to the strength of the knocking to facilitate extraction. Then, the worker cuts off the parotid gland with a small blade, takes it out and puts it in a small jar for later use. The remaining snail meat will not be wasted, and the workers will cook them as a delicious dinner. Those in jars are fermented in cold water until the color is released. The pigment can then be separated with a mesh sieve. The next step begins to extract the dye. The purple in it is mixed with the dry paint and then applied to the glass, as the glass does not absorb the paint and is wasted. Then put the glass outside to dry for 3 days, until it is completely dry. It can be scraped off with a scraper, and tyriant purple is made, and only 1 gram can be extracted from a 90 gene murex. Put the cloth into the dye-to-dye purple cloth. Because of its rich purple color, which is difficult to extract, it is especially precious, so it once became the color of nobles. The workers use the thread cutter to form stripes close to the crab leg meat on the surface, and automatically roll them into rolls, and then fall on the surface coated with a layer of food coloring similar to the color of crab meat, and pass them through the rear machine. The film is wrapped together and then passed through a cutting machine to cut it into small pieces. The surimi at this time is similar to the real crab meat of betta fish in terms of appearance and texture, so it is directly called crab stick. Compared with using expensive crab leg meat as raw material, the factory prefers to use fish meat with no fishy smell and better color elasticity. After these frozen surimi processed from cod are shipped back to the factory, they will first be broken up directly through a large extruder. The plant needs to dispose of more than 40,000 tons per year. The worker pours them together into the mixer, grinds the surimi and adds enough starch and protein powder into it, and then adds ice cubes instead of water to keep it below 10 degrees. State. Then continue to add an appropriate amount of cooking wine, crab sauce and salt for stirring. After 10 minutes, it is sent to the hopper on the other side of the factory with the help of the machine. At this time, the machine that is constantly stirring inside can completely eliminate the possible air bubbles in the surimi. It is then conveyed to an applicator where it is extruded into thin bags of uniform thickness. Some of the thin bags are deliberately painted with a pigment similar to the color of crab meat. They are then passed through a notched gate roll, where they are evenly cut into thin strips, which are then rolled together by a machine. They are then continued on a conveyor belt through a cutting machine to cut them into small pieces of the same length. This is to better crush them through the blender, so that the appearance looks more like silky crab legs. They are packed directly to where they are needed. Do you know how this 800-ton block of marble was mined? The difficulty lies in the need to keep the whole piece. If it is directly blasted to get some small fragments, it is of little value. So they would use a quarry cutting saw. The 2-meter-long chain, combined with ultra-sharp diamond serrations, can cut a 3-meter-long slit in an hour. Where it is impossible to cut, quarrymen cut by hand using special tools. It is covered with a layer of hard diamond particles. Workers thread diamond cutting wire into holes drilled in the rock in advance. The end of the wire then meets the front, forming a large circle. A metal ring encircles the marble back, while a pulley inverts it onto the flywheel below. In this process, once the metal wire breaks, it will be dangerous. Therefore, workers will maintain a certain safe distance to work. Once cut, the 800-ton block of marble, if flawless, would be crafted into a $1 million product. In order to come to the rear and inspect the marble carefully, the worker must remove the marble for observation using a very strong copper water bag, which will move the marble outward through expansion. First, workers will stuff water bags into the crevices. They need to hammer it in. Then connect the high-pressure water hose and connect to the 1.5 horsepower water pump. The water will flow into the water bag through the high-pressure water pipe. It pushes the marble out about 1 meter. Once the marble is removed, another quarryman uses a miner's lamp to carefully inspect the marble for cracks. This process is critical. Once the stone cracks too much, the marble is worthless. After the inspection, they use large excavators to bring down the marble. Because the marble has too many cracks, it can only be worth $50,000. Now the marble is moved by excavators to another workshop where it is cut into 18-ton slabs. They need to come outside for an inspection before they start cutting. The camera goes to the cutting workshop, where the giant cutting machine with 18 diamond blades takes 10 hours to cut through the entire block of marble. Finally, these cut marble slabs are turned into stylish kitchen tabletops. The workers will drive all the sheep to the back of a special wooden house, in which there will be several other workers sitting there specifically to squeeze the milk. After milking a sheep, the workers would immediately open the gate next to it and let the sheep waiting in line behind the cabin. This is an old-fashioned farm with hundreds of sheep, and every morning the workers need to milk all the sheep at a rate of more than 80 times a minute, in as short a time as possible. Most of this milk is used directly to make various dairy products. The workers first pour the fresh milk into a gauze cloth with a strainer and raw cypress leaves, sifting it through multiple layers of filtration to remove any impurities. Next, rennet is added to the milk, and after it is mixed well, it is left to coagulate. After 45 minutes, the workers start to mash them with tools and then reseal them. After 10 minutes, the worker repeats the same action again, mashing it completely. When the separated curds reach a certain level, the workers slowly pull them out of the barrel and put them together in another barrel, then squeeze out as much of the whey as possible, then pinch them all together again and lay them flat in the barrel to continue the fermentation. After 20 minutes, the workers wrap the curds, which have been recurdled, in gauze and hang them up like this, and after 24 hours, an ancient cheese has been made. Follow me next issue to learn more interesting science knowledge.